Hello, I'm Laura Wakefield,
And I'm Kelly Ott.
and let's see, what are we talking about today? I think we are continuing our discussion on the cons of social media. And when you are a professional and you're using those groups as a forum to vent, and we all have to do that at some point.
We never vent, right?
Oh no. But the question is, should we be doing that in a social media group?
There's certainly some risks, and we've been talking about the pros and cons, as Laura said. But one of the biggest risks that I see with venting is that when I have a really bad day or something I want to get off my chest, or I have a beef with someone or something, I can come and talk to Laura about it, and that conversation is a moment in time between two people in a private moment.
Right.
So expressing that frustration, I think is really different when it's between two people privately and no one else hears that, right?
Right, and we have an inherent trust as well. That, it stays with me as we joke. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So
Right.
It's like going to be just between you and me.
And if Laura didn't agree or had an altering viewpoint, we could discuss that privately.
Which I often do.
Which we do, and that's one of the reasons that we like to vent to each other is for that alternative perspective.
Yes.
For sure.
Right.
But the problem with doing it in a social media forum or group is that it's not a private conversation between two people. It's a private conversation between 2,000 people.
You and your 2,000 closest friends.
Right.
That you don't even really know.
Right. So, and the opportunity, I guess, for there to be a lot more altering viewpoints and dissent with what you're discussing certainly creates a larger risk to you professionally and liability wise, right?
And a lot of times those individuals are out of your context. They don't really understand all the details that you're focusing on and dealing with, whereas when it was just between you and me, I know the context. For example, I know the state and the district guidelines. I know your profession guidelines. I know the personality of the person you're talking about, and those challenges, whereas when it's on a social media group, those folks don't know your context.
Right. And I think that when we're venting to each other, we can identify and we can kind of be there to support each other. But when you're doing it on a forum, I think there's a more of a negative connotation associated with it.
Yeah.
And it ends up, or it can end up, reflecting on us individually, professionally, impacting our business or our professional reputation or even our job if we're not careful.
That's a good point. I had not thought about that till you just said it. When it turns into like a thread of comments, it turns into this more judgmental thing and reminds me of the professional lynching that you were telling me about earlier.
Versus the support thing when it was just you and me. I vent to you and you're like, I hear you, but here's some strategies. I validate it, but I support you, but you got to move forward and move on to this next level. Whereas in the comment thread, it just kind of turns into a lot of never-ending judgment.
Right, and so even if your purpose for venting that is for that shared support or that validation, it turns into something totally different online. Unfortunately,
it's so true. That is so true.
And I think the liability piece is something that we often forget about. When we're discussing, I'm pretty confident that that conversation is going to stay between the two of us. You might at some point share with someone else who's having a similar experience. Oh yeah, I have a colleague, she experienced this XYZ, this is what happened to her, this is what her advice was or my advice was. But when you're doing it online, you don't know what the mindset of those other people are and what they're thinking and how they're feeling or how they could take something. We think that it's private, but how many times have we texted each other and said, oh my God, did you see this conversation, this thread, and snapshots, screenshots of the conversation. So even though she might not be part of the group, I've sent it to her or vice versa. Or think about how many times
I forward it on to a friend and she forwards it on to someone and so on, and it circles all the way back, and maybe it gets to a parent or that person's principal. And you're talking about the principal and venting about the principal in that thread. And so
Right.
you don't know how that stuff gets around.
Mhm.
It's true.
Yeah. You know, and I go to a lot of different schools, and I remember one day just on my personal, it wasn't a business related thing, my page saying, oh my gosh, what a crazy day. You know, I've already been
yeah.
to blah, blah, blah. And there was a lockdown at, you know, at my first school, or, you know, I've
Showing
already,
the stress of your day.
right,
Yeah.
I've already been in a lockdown situation.
Mhm.
And man, I got pulled into that office pretty quickly. And what they didn't realize is that I go to 4 or 5 other schools, so there was no way for people to know what
Which
school.
one it was.
But I can tell you that administration was on that. Why are you discussing this? You know, and I didn't say any details, nothing other
Right.
than I was venting about how stressful my day was, and I had already been in a lockdown. I was basically stuck there until, you know, I
get
couldn't
out.
go to my next place.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, we don't think about those things when we vent online. Plus, I think the venting can lead to a lot of other problems for us professionally when we don't realize about the ethics violations in
Oh,
our
yes.
professions.
And it's in many of the professions in special education and related services. Those ethics are very similar from profession to profession. And we know that this is definitely one of those violations. It all goes back to, you know, we should be protecting that information and acting in a professional manner.
Right. I know in ASHA we have an entire section on our ASHA Board of Ethics for speech language pathologists, and there are ethical violations with specifically venting or talking poorly about clients and colleagues. So you want to be really careful. You know, our job is to make sure that we can continue and that our colleagues can continue to serve people in a professional manner. And if we are saying anything that can negate that, that we are responsible for those comments
Right.
and those opinions that we are posting out there, whether our opinions are validated or not,
Right.
we're responsible for them. So
That is
you
true.
want to be really mindful of that. I've also seen a lot of conversations about, you know, parents, just very negative things about parents. And I really, we've been there. We've all been there with those frustrations, but you want to be really careful about how you are portraying that out there in the public, because ultimately our parents may be reading some of those
Yes.
conversations. And you know, even for us as professionals, we're parents, so which hat am I going to have on when I'm reading that comment?
Right. And another thing to remember is that when you put it in writing, that's written evidence and a parent can use that. And versus just if, you know, like we were saying
Right.
something in the hallway to each other. But wow, when you put it out there on, you know, social media, it's right there in black and white. There's the evidence. You said that. Your little profile picture is next to saying that stuff you shouldn't have said, right?
Right.
So,
Well, I think that's what we wanted to talk about today. Thank you for joining us on Focus Point 11. Please be aware that these are our opinions. Thank you for joining us.